button. So this is our empathy training team 4, and I'm not even sure what meeting it is. It's actually it's the 6th meeting, and so we want to set our intention, fostering a culture of empathy. Does that kind of work for everyone? And we kind of light our candle. Can't start without the candle. So. It's actually not a candle. What do you call these lamps? It's an Indian lamp.
Yeah, different in different languages here. But in my language, it's called Valakku.
Walaka. Okay. We have our empathy Walaka here. So with that, we'll turn it over to the two of you, Denise and Dee Dee. You're facilitating this meeting. Yay.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing this.
So Denise and I chatted this week, and she is taking the second of the chapters, so chapter 6, and I'm doing the Roadblocks, which is 5 today. And the way that we're going to do this is pretty much just following the book, just having a brief conversation about the material, and then moving into a demonstration of the practice and then practicing. And the practice is going to look a little bit different because in a training setting, what we're typically doing, we would have people break out into pairs, into dyads, right? Or triads into 3s. And since we have, we'll have 4 people here, which means it'll be less time, Denise. So we may have a shorter meeting today. It means that it will, instead, we're going to do a little bit of a round robin. So 2 people will start off, and then as we have done with the empathy circles, with somebody then choosing the next person, we would use that same concept, and we'll have 1 speaker and 1 listener. The other people in the group will be observers. And that when that person is done, I'm going to look at my notes here. When that person is done speaking, then they will choose the next person that they want. The listener will choose the next person to become, because they'll become the speaker, and they'll choose the next person to listen to them. And then we'll do it that way. And I'll give you more thorough instructions as we get there. One of the things about the roadblocks that we both talked about that we think are important is, and Bill mentions it in the book too, that the roadblocks can sometimes come across as these are bad things to do. Don't ever do any of these things. And there's a bunch of them, right? What are there, 12? Right? And that's not necessarily true. There are some things that there may not be very many times, if ever, depending on your own personality and style, that you would ever utilize some of these things in language. But there's a place for all of the roadblocks. It's just that it's not in listening. So these are specifically roadblocks to listening, not roadblocks for other things that you might do in a conversation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that they're roadblocks to deep listening, but you can use them for other things, and don't be judgmental about them.
Yeah.
Although we kind of hope that most people aren't running around doing shaming and blaming
right.
and that kind of thing. Those are roadblocks to bigger things.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I can, unfortunately, and I think we can all come up with times when perhaps we've done it and certainly been on the receiving end, or we've given it in some way. Probably not the best way to have any kind of conversation. And yet we're human, so, we're going to make mistakes like that. But in general, some of those things, like the shaming, are ones that I would hope we would not do very much of, put it that way, ever. But they're certainly not conducive to that deep empathetic listening. So if we just go through and look at the chapter, and I wonder if anybody had some just brief comments or questions about the roadblocks if you got a chance to look at that. And if you don't, that's fine too. You know,
I definitely do. That I've been collecting roadblocks, so I have a website where I have about 30 of them listed. So besides the 12, there's...
you've gone above and beyond.
Yeah.
Gordon's, and this is coming from Thomas Gordon, you know, from the 60s when communication first kind of started as a thing, at least here in the United States. So what other roadblocks have you seen, Edwin?
Oh, yeah. I can't, on top of the 12, I don't even remember the specifics.
Okay.
But I do have a link. I can send it to, and it's, I just collected the blocks that as I've been reading material, I've just been collecting them. And there's a lot from NBC. They have a lot of other blocks besides the 12, and then so it's in everything from abuse, agreeing, analyzing, anxiety. Just like fear and anxiety, I think is a roadblock of its own, you know, versus kind of a verbal sort of thing. There's autism is a block, you know, so I've kind of expanded the sense of what a block is to cover everything, you know. Boredom is a block, just being bored with somebody. So there's a whole list that I set up.
I don't know about autism.
Yeah, people with autism have blocks to some aspects of empathy.
Right, but not to listening necessarily. There's a difference.
Yeah, they have.
I mean, to me, that's just something you can't help.
Mm-hmm.
These are roadblocks that we can do something about.
Right. Uh-huh.
I don't know. It just, I have a family member with autism, so I'm also hypersensitive to it, so forgive me. Deb.
Yes. So something that became apparent to me yesterday is after leaving a week-long retreat of a lot of deep listening to people and really having to follow the rules. We had a guideline of, I mean, not a strict guideline, but there was an inherent guideline in listening and speaking and guiding each other. We were in mostly dyads, a large group in dyads. But anyway, I was bringing someone home from the airport in Seattle, and I was speaking, and I continued to get interrupted mid-sentence. Mm-hmm. And to me, it's a lack of presence, lack of awareness that someone is in the middle of a sentence, and I'm really trying to complete this thought I have, and so I say lack of presence or lack of interest. Don't know what it was, but it happened several times, and I'm going to be working with this person a little bit, and not a lot, but we kind of had an interesting connection nonetheless. And I'm trying to, and she's probably about 30, early 30s. I'm just wanting to say, I would love to be able to finish my sentence.
Yeah. I've had a week of dealing with bureaucracies, you know, all of them, Social Security, unemployment, healthcare, you know, just all these things I just needed to take care of, and it wound up. And what I've discovered is that, to me, what's most infuriating is that people will respond to me, and like you say, Deb, talk right over me, right? And I finally had to say, I need you to stop doing that. I need you to really hear my whole piece, please, before you respond, because I keep having to make these phone calls, and you all keep not responding to my inquiry. Mm-hmm. Because, you know, we just need to slow down for a minute. I can't keep doing this week after week after week. It's wearing me down. And, you know, I almost wonder if it's, and I don't mean to sound judgmental, and it's going to be that way though, but if it's a little bit of apathy,
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that apathy is in general or for their job, or, you know, I don't have a sense of that. But I agree with you. It's very frustrating and just very demeaning. You know, clearly you're not very important, right?
It's also, I think, the part of the issue with some of the in differentiating many of these roadblocks in working with people on those, that many of them have been trained in the roadblocks as a way of working with people. So
give an example, Denise. Yeah.
The sense that your job is to, you know, even as you're listening, your job is to figure out what the problem is, and you jump in. And so just like physicians interrupt, they've moved up to, I think, 25 seconds or something. But when they first did this research, physicians would interrupt the patient at about 18 seconds because they'd figured out what was wrong, and they would jump in to do it, because that's what they were trained to do. So the many of these roadblocks are really trained into our capacity for, and we think of them as listening. People think that when they're questioning people that they're listening. They think that when they're doing those things that they are. So it part of it is an unlearning about recognizing those.
Great point.
And also time constraints. Physicians are under time constraints. They've got to, you know, get 40, 50 patients in a day. They see patients every 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And so this person I'm working with works for Kaiser in the financial department. So, I mean, she's on the phone mostly. And so she's trying to get to the bottom line of, let's get this account cleaned up. What's your next payment?
Mm-hmm.
All of that very quickly, and wrap it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point. And I know when I worked for Kaiser, and I suspect it's the same or similar, we had to account for every 15 minutes of our schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Every day. That was the first thing we had to do. And I thought, every 15 minutes? I mean, good God. You know, so, yeah, you do have to. Diet, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I also see cultural upbringing also is quite a roadblock to listening, because even the interpretation of how the word listening, at least here in India, it's very much like if a parent says to a child, you're not listening, it actually means that the listening is actually like, you just have to do what I say. You know,
Okay.
It means that here
It's the
too.
same here.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm guilty of that one years ago, thank goodness. But now I try it with my cat. Doesn't work any better than with my kid, let me tell you.
Yeah, so even understanding the word, I guess, is quite a...
But you bring up a good point about, I think, what Denise was saying too, and Deb, around some of these roadblocks being taught, you know, whether it's culturally in large groups of people, you know, of a country culturally, or of a language culturally, or the medical profession of a culture, or some other kind of health profession. And I think most workers are under deadlines like that.
Yes.
You know, that they do have so many tasks that they need to complete in a day, particularly if it's on the phone. There's some expectation, somebody's counting those, you know, how long are you spending on each call? So yeah, there's that push from whatever stakeholder it is, or stakeholders, to move along, you know. So yeah, doing deep listening, I think, it's amazing anybody does it.
I think just listening, it doesn't have to be deep.
Yeah.
Just listening. And and so I'm just wondering if, it just came to me this minute, if we could set up a bit of a preamble when you were getting ready to speak, or if I were getting ready to speak to someone, I'd say, you know, I would really like to be listened to without interruptions. And I don't know if that's setting up a blame or shame situation, or how to say it, but set it up and say, you know, I have it could be very simple, like, which grocery store to go to. I don't know. Or it could be something more in depth, more serious. But how to maybe set it up so that you get their attention and help and train them to listen to you in a certain way. Actually, not just the grocery store, but to hear the whole thing. Like, I prefer this grocery store because they have more organic. I mean, there's other stuff to it possibly, and possibly not.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, dealing with the bureaucracies this week, one of the things that I wound up doing was doing something similar to that. Because again, this wasn't my first time at these rodeos, if you will. I've been dealing with this it's now 4 months. And it has literally worn me down. And so I've said at the beginning, I'd really appreciate it if you would let me, share a bit, and I promise I'll let you jump in at some point. I just have had a really difficult time with people hearing the entirety of the story, and it's very complicated. So I'll do my best to explain it in a concise way, but in a thorough way. And then if you want to ask me questions, I certainly will be happy to answer those.
And then including in that, and I respect your time too. I'm not going to keep you on the phone for 2 hours.
Right.
Not even an hour. I would just like to be heard, and I'll let you know when I'm done.
Yeah.
Something like that. Conveying that you want their time you want them to respect your time and what you need, and you will respect theirs.
Right. And it's almost, for me, it was almost, you can do your job better and perhaps even in a shorter period of time if you let me do this in the beginning. And then, we can move into the problem solving or task-oriented pieces of this. Yeah. Go ahead, Denise.
So to bring it back to the practice of the roadblocks.
Yep.
And what we're doing here in this whole series, this model of exercises, which are pretty old, and we have used them for a long time.
Yeah.
But the one of the things that's important is for people to learn to recognize what their own tendency to jump in and do is. So, and people have individual roadblocks that they react to, and we should, when we get to the practice here, you'll see what your go-to strategy is for jumping in, and we learn about that. The other thing is that what this is focused on is not about getting listening, but about being able to model listening, being able to do it such that is one of the primary learning strategies when we're working with others, of modeling that, and that they can begin to do it, because it takes intentional practice to be able to do that. And you all have developed a lot of that capacity to do it, but that modeling it for others is the sort of way of this method, if you will. It's really focused on what the listener does or doesn't do, or how they're constructing it. It really doesn't have as much to do with what the actual speaker is talking about. It has to do with what the listener does with it, how they respond to it. So that is an important. It isn't as much about the collaboration, if you will, in this case, or the doing that. It's about training people to understand, to use the skills to be able to take it in. It doesn't mean it's not the piece about being able to convey your own stuff, which is another important component. So anyway, I think we get practice with this as we go, and that it really is focused on the listener. And that might be an important distinction that we make as we go forward.
Thanks, Denise. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I guess I'm having a disconnect here, because these roadblocks are what other people are saying to me in response to what I'm saying.
Right. So if I'm the listener, like I just did, interrupt you, that would be a roadblock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that chapter was not about the listener. It is about the listener and what they're doing.
Yes.
Which is the roadblocks. And then I read the other chapter actually just now. I can't quite remember. Picture without sound.
Yeah. Well, we're going to practice that.
We're going to do one at a time here.
I hear you, but what I'm getting at is, how are we in training people to listen? If they're giving us those roadblocks, what are the corrections, to train them to listen differently?
I want to say something about that because there's a lot of differences of opinion in this work about how much value it is to prescribe poor practice, which is practicing the roadblocks is poor practice.
Yeah.
But it really helps people sometimes to see the difference and what you recognize in yourself. I mean, I use those roadblocks lots of times. So my job and what I can do is take responsibility for my own reactions, my own responses, and change them. That's what I have control over.
Awareness.
And so
it builds awareness.
Not just awareness. It actually takes doing something different. You got to be aware of it first. But
yeah, that's what I meant.
And then what?
Yeah, and then you have to. You really in this, the learning to manage your own writing reflex, that we call it, the desire to get in there and do one of those or something like that. Learning how to manage that is a really important step in becoming a good listener.
Well, when we've done the exercises in the other groups, so we would someone would speak, and instead of getting a reflection, they would give a roadblock, right? So
we're getting to that.
Yeah, you're going to get there, but it's just that it's feeling that difference, feeling the visceral difference between experiencing a roadblock and experiencing listening. You just kind of feel it in your body, and that seems to me to be very helpful, just to have that sensation. And people will say, hey, this is, I can really sense the difference. I feel all constricted and stuff. So, I think that's what you're kind of addressing.
Yeah. And we're going to hold conversation until the end of the whole exercise, just because I think it's going to be hard to have a conversation after each dyad and then kind of come back together. And there'll be similarities in experiences, but since we're such a small group today too, everybody will get an opportunity to talk about what it felt like, and that's one of the things that we do in MI trainings are exercises like this to encourage people to feel it, not just hear, but hear. In which instance did you feel more listened to? In which instance did you feel more respected? Or, something along those lines, and talk about those differences, as Denise is saying. So it sounds like we can move on to the quick demo. Is that okay? Is everybody ready for that? Okay.
Yeah.
So Denise, the conversation that we're going to use, the topic, is something about yourself that you might like to change or improve in your daily life. So you all can be thinking about that. And by the way, it's right in the book. I'm using it right from the book.
Okay.
The order in which I'm saying things are a little different, but it's essentially the same thing. So Denise, tell me something about yourself that you might like to change or improve in your daily life.
Well, I've been thinking about this. You've
been thinking about this for a while already.
Yeah. And what I'd really like to do is have more fun.
So you're just really a awful person to be around right now.
Well, I don't know about awful, but I find myself not having as much fun as I think would be good for my health.
Okay, so it sounds like your real problem then has more to do with improving your health and not just having fun.
Well, I don't know. I don't know, but I don't know about that. I mean, my health is pretty good in general. I just feel that that's missing.
Okay, so let me tell you how you could do this. You know, your grandkids have been around, and so, you know, spending more time with them would be fun.
Yes. Yeah, it is fun. It's exhausting, but it's fun. Yeah, it is. And that's one of the things that makes me notice, actually, that I'm not having as much fun, is that when it's there, I notice it.
Okay. And I have my bell, which is what I use to interrupt people and say, okay, we're done. On to the next thing. So how is that, Denise?
Well, what I want to say is you slid in this is a good example of sliding advice and suggestions into your reflections. You make them sound like you're reflecting, but you're not.
I know. I have a hard time not doing that anymore.
You're putting your own stuff in there. So it wasn't terribly satisfying.
Yeah, I would imagine not.
You want me to pick somebody to
if you would, that would be great.
Yeah.
And then I'll ring the bell. You're going to have, 3 to 5 minutes somewhere in there. And I'll ring my little, I'll do that.
Okay.
Did everybody hear that?
Okay, Edwin.
Okay.
Just to be clear, you're giving blocks to empathy in your listening?
Yes, I'm going to be throwing my roadblocks in. You're going to be talking about something you'd like to change in your life.
Okay. Yeah, so one thing I'm trying to change is to become more sensitive to felt experience. So that is such an important thing to do. I totally agree with that. That having that sense of experiencing yourself will really add to your ability to work with others. Yeah, I'm glad you really agree with that. Because it's like I'm trying to tap into, be aware of what it is that I'm feeling and be able to speak to it, and be able to express it and have that sensitivity.
I read this really great book about how you can train yourself to tap into your own, your own feelings. It's really good. I can send you the link.
Yeah, that'd be great if you would send me that. Cause I'm really trying to find ways of doing it, and it's. I think it's part of empathy, right? If we want to be able to speak empathically, and to be able to speak empathically, it means feeling into ourselves and then addressing the feelings that we have. And what I find is I don't express myself within the context of what's happening.
Really, it's in the situation where you're doing empathy, it's not about you. You're being empathic with others. It's not really about you. So maybe the real issue is getting yourself out of the way so you can actually be with.
Yeah, but the part I'm looking at is it's like when I'm speaking, it's like, for example, something I wouldn't naturally say is, I'm finding it very annoying like you're doing. So there's this feeling that comes up, and I'm not authentically saying it. I want to get better
that's
authentically.
Just gonna hurt people if you say that. If you go and say, hey, you're just annoying the heck out of me, like I'm probably doing to you right now. It might just be really hurtful to say that. So I wouldn't do that if I were you. Stop.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it. I wonder about that. So what's a little bit of reaction exactly?
So you get the idea, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And by the way, just a gentle reminder here that we've got, in the book, you actually have under each one of the roadblocks, there are examples, and feel free to lift those right from the page. I know, especially in the morning, sometimes when I'm not feeling awake yet, it can be helpful to have my crib notes in front of me, or maybe late in the evening in your case, Jaya. So
for me, mine just pop up. I know.
They're natural. You're natural.
Exactly. Okay.
Okay, then Deb, speak.
Yes.
Do you want to speak?
Yes. I had been practicing and noticing.
Oh, just a second. I just got to get something over here. Okay, go ahead.
Of not being able to hold people's attention. And so I'm using the word I. I'm being very cautious. I'm correcting myself. I'm doing a pretty good job when explaining things, not saying you, the generic you, saying
Yeah,
I.
I wouldn't say a lot of you. Doing a lot of yous is just not very good. So yeah, I think it's really dangerous.
Yeah, I've been proud of myself for catching myself and thinking that's sort of the connection to get people to hear that I'm telling my story. I'm speaking myself. It's worthy of being heard. But I am not being able to capture their attention.
I would say if you want to capture people's attention, just, get in their face and, just really say, hey, I need to say this, and just be demanding. I think that's kind of one of the best way of just dealing with people. You just, you can't be kind of wishy-washy and kind of wimpy about it. You got to get right into their face.
Yeah, I used to do a lot of that. That didn't work either. So I've been trying to refine my process. And I know I have a low voice. I'm a small person. You can't tell from here. I know I look like a giant from the screen. But, and so it's a matter of how do I gather and kind of capture their interest.
Yeah, well, I think you're on a really good path. I think you're really doing some good, going in a good direction. So really want to commend you. Huh?
What direction is that? Could you?
Oh, just that, instead of being in people's face, that you're trying to find alternatives of how to relate to people. So more effectively. I think that's really good.
But what I noticed.
I really agree with that approach.
What I noticed is hanging out in the Infinity hot tub at 1440 Multiversity this week, those with the loudest voice, which really annoyed me, I just wanted to drown her, was, had everyone's attention. She was just.
I had the same experience. I went to Esalen, which is also a retreat center like that, and they have a beautiful hot tub that just sits and looks out over the ocean. And we'd be sitting there, we're naked. And it was the same kind of a thing where the person with the loudest voice would get all the attention, and they'd be telling the stories. There's no space for, for you to kind of,
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So actually, I think Edmund sort of failed a little bit because he actually was giving enough empathy in there to hold my attention, like that. He said, "Yeah, I understand." Even that word, he said it. And
Right. Okay.
I'm just too naturally empathic or something.
Well, you're our guru, so.
Uh-oh, now I'm in trouble.
So who's going next?
Oh, I need to pick someone for. So I'm going to listen to Daya, right?
Whoever was the speaker.
Which was me.
Was you? Okay. Yeah. Pick the next listener. Yep.
Okay. So Daya, I'm going to listen to you. Okay.
Yeah. So I've been trying to reach out for help.
Working doesn't work. I wouldn't just let it flow naturally. Relax. Let it flow naturally. Kind of like I'm doing with you now.
Okay, but this reaching out to people for help is very difficult for me. So just relaxing about that is not really helping, because I really find that
it makes you look needy. And I'm kind of getting that from you now, that you're kind of needy.
That's the difficult part. I already feel that I'm needy if I have to look for help, Why can't I do things by myself? But, it's really necessary. I feel I like even right now, it's annoying that you're interrupting me when I really want to be heard.
But you asked me to listen to you. You asked me to listen to you. I'm here. I'm all yours. I'm right here, really. Keep going.
This is what I receive when I say something, and then I just don't know what to say. And then if people are going to tell me what they want me to do, it's really difficult to just say what I want to say.
I would get up and walk away. These people are not worthy of your attention. I would just say, screw them, and get up and walk away and tell them you're back. You're showing them your back. Well, tell them that you're more important than they are.
Yeah, but that's only going to make it more difficult to connect with people. And how am I going to find? It's very difficult, you know. It's very difficult to get support. And
you're not listening to me. You're not listening to me. You don't need to care and connect to everybody. Not everybody has to be your spiritual friend or spiritual guide, and some people are not worth your time. I think that's where you're at.
Maybe, but I need to figure it out myself, no?
Okay.
I need to get to talk to people, and then first ask them, are you going to listen, or not just listen for anything. If I want to lift some things and just get someone to support me in that, and I need someone to help me out with that, and I have difficulty in actually asking for support.
For people like you who have difficulty connecting to people, it's best just to use a spirit guide. A spirit guide is private, and you don't have to deal with the reality of anything. That's my suggestion. I think your spirit guide is a bear. That's about it, and good luck with that.
Okay.
We'll stop it.
Zip me up.
I gotta tell you, that was a lot of fun. I've been looking for fun.
Exactly. There you go, Denise. That's why I always love doing this one in training, because you hear a lot of laughter.
Yeah.
People get it right away.
Yeah.
Daya.
Yes. So I speak to you.
Okay.
Sorry, you speak and I listen. And
I'll speak. That's right.
Yeah.
So let's see. Something about myself that I'd like to change or improve in my daily life. I'd like to get some more exercise. And,
get up from the chair right now.
Well, I can't get up right now. I have to spend a bit of time on my heating pad in the morning before my muscles sort of wake up and allow me to be able to move a little bit. So, and it's awfully cold and foggy out right now. So I kind of like the sun to come out, which...
You want to sit on your heating pad, or you want to go out in the sun? It seems like you're not deciding which one you want to do.
I kind of like both. I have to start with one so that then I can work up to the other one. But I'm not really getting a chance here to talk about, what I really want to do.
You know what I really like to do? I really like a cooler place, because it's already so hot here, and I just like some really cooler place to be. It's yeah.
So you like the cooler spots. Okay, that's great. That's great. I know for me, I can't really do cold. I need more warmth. So this time of year is always a little tricky for me, because our Bay Area weather in the summertime is always foggy and cold. So we can always tell who the tourists are because they've got shorts on and t-shirts in our summer, which is never warm.
You could just go with the tourists and have some fun. That way you get some movement, and then you can also just take a breath of fresh air, and just have some fun with them.
Well, that's one way of looking at it. I went for a walk the other day and found my cat down at the walkway. So he and I were hanging out.
Did you pick it up? Did you pick him up? And really?
Oh yeah. Yeah, and somebody came by and had to take a picture of him because he always has his Batman jacket on, so everybody loves that. And He's a pretty distinctive looking guy. So he hangs out down
So
there.
he got all the attention which you didn't.
Yeah. Yeah, he always does.
That sucks.
Yeah. Yeah. But I did think maybe I'd go down to my neighbor's and take his dog out for a walk. And because he's got a little dog that when my neighbor works, really gets a little anxious, starts to whine and make a lot of noise. And I feel bad for him down there. He's a cute little guy. And I've got a key, so I can walk in and get him.
That's so sweet of you.
Okay. Whoops, I've deadened it. There we go. Good job. I feel completely unheard. All right. Did everybody get a chance? I think I've lost track.
Yes.
Okay.
I think so.
So how was the exercise, and when you weren't doing the exercise, what was it like to watch it, even to be the observers, if you will?
It's painful to watch.
Yeah. How so?
It just feels disjointed. I can feel in my body there's a kind of a tension, and you know, it just feels constricting. It doesn't feel open and flowing, which is, you know, it feels jagged.
Okay. Yeah, definitely not what you're used to, and not what you try to emulate.
Oh, it's what I'm used to in everyday life.
Okay, hold on. Deb, go ahead.
I would say it felt open and flowing, but with aggression. Open and flowing aggression.
A little too much.
Yeah. Any is a little too much. So, and it, you know, in this world of everybody knows everything because of the internet, you can even diagnose yourself over the cables, that opinions and information is what we use to connect with people, and we forget the style. We just throw the style out the window.
Yeah. Yeah. So it no longer becomes about connecting with another person. It's kind of what we were talking about earlier. It's that task-oriented listening.
Content.
Yeah. That I'm just listening for when I can interject. I need to say something because I'm important here. And sometimes more important than you. And I need to find an answer to whatever the problem is. So I'm already formulating that in my head and thinking about the next thing I'm going to say, rather than putting aside that agenda and really just being with you in the moment.
And if people know we're listeners, they think they can just dump on us all the time, anytime, and there's no connection. It's just
good point.
Dump, 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 dump.
It becomes more of a one-way thing. I'm just vomiting on you, but you don't get to participate in this at all, other than being the vessel.
Right. The vomit vessel, the VV, the vomit vessel.
Yeah, good point.
You know, I mean, actually, I really thought it was fun, and I realized that it even as I was listening, or you know, throwing the roadblocks around, that how driven I am to get my in there, to get in there. And so the practice of it comes so easily to me to want to interject and to want to jump in and do it. And this was contrived, but I'm still very aware of how much I want to get in there. And how much when you get in there, just watching and listening, you know, it is in every single one of these, it became not about the speaker, but about the listener. That the story gets wrapped up with the listener, and the speaker, what the speaker's trying to talk about gets completely lost. It's just what the interjector is doing, if you will. Yeah, I think that's such a good point. And I'm guilty of that as well, that
and it's out of a sense of curiosity and eagerness. I know my intentions are okay. It's just the way that it's coming out.
Yeah.
That I can divert that conversation, and now it's about my experience or whatever I'm interjecting. Yeah. Go ahead.
To me, it feels like it's the norm. And, when I think about, after a long day of processing and they were hanging out in the pool, I mean, for me to start talking about feelings and needs, my kind of MVC thing is like, do we really want that now?
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
And then it becomes a battle of personhood. Like you say your thing, and then I've got to counter that with, my thing. And it really is, it's a battle for me. I always feel like I'm trying to stand my ground, and they may not feel that way, but it's an uncomfortable place. I don't like it. I feel like I'm in a battle.
It almost sounds like you're describing a competition.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a subtle competition.
Yeah.
You're very subtle, and it's the norm.
Yeah.
So we don't
I guess people are really fighting to be heard, so it becomes a competition of who gets to be heard. And the person with the louder voice at times gets to be heard, and the people who have a tendency to listen or be more silent get to be the listeners, although they just want to be heard too.
Yeah, that's a good point. Edwin, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I kind of step back a little bit from it to think in terms of the training aspect, that it seems that what would be good for the training is to take each block and just address the one block. For example, I could imagine, in the future that there would be a training just on advising, just on directing, but creating some tools around it. So a very clear modeling of it, of each one, of maybe even a role play between directing. One person plays directing and one person plays empathy, and the two have a conversation with each other, but they do it with empathic listening. So you could kind of explore the nature. I don't know if that I just saw a little, I don't know if that made sense, but
yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
So
I'm waking up still. So
if you were advising and I am empathy, that we start dialoguing with each other. I would say, I'd really like to connect and have a deeper experience of connecting with you, and then you as directing.
Well, the way that you could really do that is. And I would say something.
But you do it with a reflective listening, with empathic listening. So directing does empathize, but speaks from your point of view. It's like, why do you want directing? Why is directing, important? I don't know if,
I think I'm concerned, and I may be completely misunderstanding this, but what Denise said in the beginning about our concern in MI, at least, about practicing the negative, if you will.
Practice.
That we don't, I mean, we can do it like this, I think, on occasion. And there's another exercise that I often use, the persuasion taste of MI, that Denise will know, that's very similar to this in a way. But we end with the positive modeling. So we might start with this sort of persuasion. It's called a persuasion exercise, and everybody laughs and has fun with it, like we did here, and then we contrast that with just a taste of what MI feels like and sounds like, and then contrasting those two, the compare and contrast, and it really helps people to feel it. But I think it's important that we end with, this is the way we want to move towards.
That could be part of it. You experience what a directing would be like, and then it's modeled. We have like one web page. I'm kind of imagining like one web page. We just explore directing, and then you see it modeled, and then you see it contrasted, maybe a couple of different examples of it, so people can really get a sense of it. but there's probably other ways too of kind of exploring the topic so people can get a deeper, richer understanding and experience of the difference between. So I'm just thinking in terms of a design activity. So.
One thing that's really important about these is that the way that this builds is to, and I very seldom use negative practice because we're all familiar. Everybody said this is the way it happens in the world. We know what that is. We don't need a lot of instruction about it. But this builds. It's like, okay, this is not listening. And now we're going to start with, well, what do we mean by listening then? Mm-hmm. And so for what you're talking about of practicing the empathic listening, they haven't learned it yet. They don't know it yet. They don't know how to form reflections yet. So this sequence goes from the roadblocks to what we're going to do next, which is nonverbal listening, to what we're going to do after that about how you think reflectively, how you put yourself in a different space inside to listen, and how you think reflectively, how you form reflections, how you deepen those reflections, how you do that. So the contrast comes in first learning, oh, the things that I normally do are not listening. Okay, so what do I do instead? Okay, I learn how to reflect. I learn how to do that, but that's the sequence. So they don't know how to do it yet.
Mm-hmm. They don't like to spend too much time on negative practice.
Right, I don't.
With the positive practice.
There's comparing and contrasting, but I don't even really care if they know all the details about how the 15 different ways of being able to be directive. I mean, I don't, it's like they can come up with those on their own,
Yeah.
You want to kind of focus on what are the positive steps.
What do you do
practicing?
Instead?
Right. And I think to take it even a step further, my other concern would be that somehow people could walk away from that thinking, oh, there's a way that I can be empathetic and directing. If I just use reflections, then I can be empathetic, but I'm still telling you what to do.
Yeah.
And it's like, no. I mean, I get that even in trainings that people will sometimes say, oh, now I get to tell people what to do when I talk about giving advice. And I go, that's not the point here. No point at which you get to tell people what to do. No. But it can already, even live, when we've spent several hours talking about other ways of communicating, even then people can slip back into that, oh, now here's my time. I get to tell people what to do and be directive, or I can, whatever it is, and fall into those roadblocks. So I think I'm extra cautious on that as well.
Yeah. What do you think? Shall we move, since we're at the top of the hour, shall we move to the next one? Because this will be a contrasting practice and we can come back to this discussion when we get through it. Does that make sense?
Okay with me?
Good.
Okay.
Whatever.
So what we're going to talk about now is the listening that doesn't have anything to do with the words. And what we know from our communication research is that the vast majority of communication actually is conveyed non-verbally, and that there's so much more that goes into both expressing and being able to convey understanding, being able to convey that we're attentive. And you mentioned attention earlier, Deb, about how difficult it is sometimes to get people's attention. And this is a practice, what we're talking about now is a practice in what do we do to convey attention? And of course, we saw several things happen in the last exercise that are things that clearly detract from the attention. But this we're going to focus on now about how do we convey that in when we're present with someone, that we convey our attention. So this also is an exercise that in training is typically people get divided into pairs and they do it in their pairs. But we're going to do it in the same round robin format, which means that we'll have one person speaking, one person who is just listening, and the only type of all you're doing is you're silent. You're not. You might use a few or something like that, but no words. And you're just conveying your attention. You're working to understand it, to hear what the person is saying. And we'll stop it after 3 minutes, and we'll move to the next person. So at this point, we're not adding any words in. We're not adding any reflections. We're not adding any summaries in. We're just spending that time demonstrating our willingness to take in someone's story. And the rest of us, what I'm going to encourage everybody to do is to have some place, you might even want to keep some notes about what you notice that the person is doing to listen, to convey that they're present and they're understanding. Their body language, their tone, what is it that they're doing? What are the things that you notice that convey, that the listener conveys, that indicate that they're present and listening? Okay, so we're going to have many different opportunities here to watch different people who do it differently, who may convey that listening differently. This is also what I'm really seeing, is that this gives us an opportunity, because of the nature of the fact that we're all online and we're all, we can't see people looking at each other. You can't really see that. What else do you see? So is there a way that you can tell that someone is actually looking at the other person? How is that working? And I think that will also inform any of these practices that we do in the training, because we are going to be in that, the people that we're training are going to be in that position too, where they may not be where they're actually sitting face to face looking at each other. Make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I don't think we need a demonstration of this. I think we can go right into the listening exercise, and I will make sure that I'm the last person in the loop. But everyone, the observers, ought to be prepared to, just keep some notes about the kinds of things that you notice that people are doing to convey listening. And when you're talking about I'm going to use the stories that are the things to talk about that are in the book, but you could always talk about something different. But the ones that have been traditionally used in this is what it was like growing up in my home, my favorite dream or dream vacation, an experience I had that might be difficult for others to understand. So the speaker is going to be talking about that, and the listener is just to listen, silently listen, and convey that you're listening to the person that is speaking. Make sense? Yeah. Edwin?
Oh, I was just, yes, thumbs up. Makes sense. That's my...
Do you want to start being the speaker and pick someone to listen to you?
Okay, I'll speak to Daya.
Yep.
Yeah, so my topic is growing up in my home. So my parents came from Germany after World War II. They were refugees. They had lived in the eastern part of Germany, had lost all the farms and everything where they had lived. They'd been expelled from kind of the eastern part of Germany. So they came over, were just new immigrants here, didn't even speak English, and I was born like 2 years after they got married. They met in Germany, but they got married here. And so I grew up in this sort of a subculture, a German subculture. So they spoke German at home because, their English was not all that great to begin with. And my mother's family came over, so we had all German, relatives we hung out with, and we went to a German church too. So as a little kid of 4 or 5 years old, I grew up in Cleveland. I was born in Cleveland. We lived there till I was about 5 years old, and so we had this little German subculture. And I was just told that when I first went to kindergarten, my English was all that good because of living in America in this German subculture. So anyway, yeah, so then when I was about 5, we moved to California, Sacramento, California, and got into the suburbs, and it was a kind of a nice place, you know, had a lot of sort of freedom. You know, as a kid, I'd go outside, and it's like, you know, you go out, do whatever you want to do in the neighborhood, or, you know, and just, they didn't really watch. Just at dinner time, it was like, you hear the call, Edwin, dinner. You just come in for dinner, and, you know, I'd hang out with friends. We'd go running through the neighborhoods and just ride our bikes. And then as we got older, we'd, you know, ride our bikes to the river, which was a couple miles away, American River, and kind of hang out, go fishing, go swimming. And it was, you know, it was pretty kind of a fun, you know, easy California lifestyle growing up, and until I was 11. Then at 11, my father started a business, electric motor repair business, and I had to go help because he, you know, they're like, couldn't hire anybody. So I was like 11 years old. On Saturdays, I'd have to go help at the shop. And I mean, like 11 years old, and I have to like answer the phone because he would go out and try to get business and stuff. And during the summer, and I'd pick up the phone, Rutch Electric, little 11-year-old. So yeah, so thanks.
Good job. Daya, would you like to pick someone to listen for you?
Yeah, Didi.
Okay, I'm ready.
I could pick the same story. Growing up at home. Yeah, growing up here, my family was difficult and fun. And yeah, I grew up in a family with, all of us was a joint family. I had my cousins, aunt, uncle, all living together in one house. And as we were as very young, we really didn't know about any of the conflicts. We were just playing, climbing trees, picking the fruits from the trees and just eating, and, you know, chasing animals around. And yeah, but after about 10 years, we started noticing the conflicts between our parents, and that started affecting us. And when I think about it now, it's like we also started acting those conflicts out between us also, you know, calling each other names, calling each other, you know, projecting whatever we heard our parents say to each other, to each other. The play stopped, and then so there are times when I do remember the fun, and I do see that there's such a lot of space and running around and jumping over walls, which was a lot of fun at the time. And yeah, there's a sadness when I see that we didn't really grow together that way. And at times when I do talk to my cousins now, it's kind of become like you can't really speak about that time of the conflict time, you know. It's not easy to listen to, because we really moved away, and then there wasn't time that our perspectives of life have been so different, and then it's just so difficult to come to a space to just come and like even talk about that conflict, like what went wrong between us, not even go to what went wrong between our parents, like what went wrong between us. And like it's so much of right and wrong, and it's like each of us have come, which is also nice in a way that we're connecting in a different way. But yeah, it's like we.
All right.
Is that the alarm?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Thank you,
Okay.
Daya.
kind of done. Yeah.
Dee Dee?
Oh, I always find this so hard to be the listener and not say anything. Great story.
Well, now you get to talk for 3 minutes.
Exactly. Okay. Edwin, let me get you to listen.
I don't know if you go to me, then I would speak next, and I already spoke.
Yeah, so you
That's
might
right.
want to go to Deb.
So Deb, I'll go to Deb. Gotcha. Thank you. Glad somebody's paying attention. Hello, Deb. Okay, what am I going to talk about? So one of the things that experiences that I've had that can be a challenge for people to understand. I have a condition called fibromyalgia, and apparently I've had it my whole life, which when I go back and look at my childhood and look at things in ways that I would get hurt by things, physically hurt, as well as emotionally hurt, but mostly the physical piece. And it never made sense to anybody. So, I would hear that, oh, that doesn't hurt, Dee Dee, for crying out loud, stop it. It did hurt, whether it was, I got burned with sparklers, and everybody would kind of make fun of me. Oh, you can't get burned with sparklers, those are fine. Or tags in the back of my clothing would scratch me and would hurt. And I'd get a lot of flack about that. And after getting diagnosed 20 years ago or so, and because it's still such a mystery condition, there still are times when even health professionals will kind of poo-poo it. Oh, it's not that big of a deal. Or, well, at least you don't have cancer. I always love that. Well, I mean, we can always think of something worse, right? It does not mean that I'm not affected by whatever's going on today. In this last week, I've had 2 major flares of the fibro, and I have not had that happen in many years. It's been pretty controlled. The arthritis is worse than the fibro, and for some reason in the past week, these things have come up, and it's very frustrating, particularly now in the midst of this so-called opiate crisis, because I am on pain medication and need to be, because I need to work. If I could retire, I might not need to take it. I would probably be happy finding alternatives or staying in bed a little bit longer, whatever it is. But that's not an option for me. And so then that becomes an added stress and burden that people have a great deal of difficulty understanding, and say, well, why don't you just try something else? Have you, or my favorite one, have you tried? And here comes and I know people mean well, but after 20 years, I've tried just about everything. And I'm pretty clear on what works for me and what's helpful and what isn't.
All right. Thank you, Dee Dee.
Yeah.
Okay, Deb?
Denise,
Okay.
let me just take a sip of water, please.
Okay.
Something I've been reviewing, thinking of over the past couple of weeks is how I may be attracted to, or it's familiar, is probably more the case, to stressful situations that I have to maybe figure them out. I get into them unconsciously, have to figure them out. And so this goes back to the family I grew up with. Is that the question or the statement? That concept. And it was very stressful, I think, for most of us in the family. And I've been having a lot of compassion come up in the past few weeks, and realizing there was a period in our family life. I mean, I had my own individual stressors that started at age 5 that I won't go into online here, but there was a period. Let's see, starting about 66, maybe even a little earlier. I'm not quite sure, but a lot of stress in the family, and an aunt had been ill with breast cancer, and she had 4 children, my cousins. We all lived within a block of each other, and she died. And my mother had been their caretaker, and then after that, because we shared a business, and it couldn't support all 9 kids, 5 of us, 4 of them, and all the kids were equal except for one in age, and so there were a lot of kids getting ready to go off to college. So somebody had to sell off their share of the business, and a coin was flipped, and my father won. And there were some hurt feelings with that, and my uncle, whose wife had died of breast cancer just a year or 2 or 3 earlier than that, was hurt and moved his family out of town and wouldn't let us speak with them for 20 years. And then and my grandmother was still alive, so she witnessed her daughter die, and her husband had died in 47. And she was living with both families off and on until she died. And then she died in that's early, I think I was a junior in high school, 71 or something. I can't quite remember the other stressors, but I'm just relating to my continued absorption in stressful situations, which may be why I'm a nurse.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think, Edwin, you're the one that hasn't gotten to listen yet. So I will start. One thing about growing up in my family, there were a lot of stresses and a lot of different things, but one thing that was really kind of unique and a positive thing was we lived in Nevada. I grew up outside of Nevada, or outside of Vegas in Boulder City, and when I was 5, we moved. We were the very first family to move to Arizona, to Page, Arizona. It wasn't a town yet, where they were building the Glen Canyon Dam. And my father had been asked to come up and he was an entrepreneur. He was a lot of other things too, but he was an entrepreneur. And he had been asked to come up and start the business end in this town, this brand new town. And so we were the first family to move in. And he built a trailer park there, and at the time it was the largest trailer park in the world, because we were 150 miles of dirt road from anything. And we watched the dam be built, and there were just lots of experiences about the being in that situation. But one thing that really stands out to me is how equalizing that was. So everybody was in the same boat. All the workers came, and all the, but everybody lived in the same trailer. I mean, there weren't any. And then we had houses brought in, and everybody lived in the same house, and it was a very equalizing thing. So there wasn't a lot of hierarchy that you see in lots of places, and people were connected. And we really needed each other. I mean, the community really needed each other because we were so isolated from lots of places. Now, of course, it got better as we got older, but I just think about how much that really impacted my sense of equality and wanting and not wanting so much hierarchy in terms of power or anything. It's like it really infused my growing up, that being in this and being pioneers. I mean, it was really kind of a pioneer thing to do. I mean, we were, not all the people that lived there had come from all different places to work there. And there was just a sense of people were all on the same footing. And we all went to the same school in a Quonset hut, for a couple of years. And it was just, it was a really valuable experience for me. And I see how much it affected me. Okay. All right. So what I'd like to do now is to ask you what you noticed that people were doing. And it's interesting. This format is interesting. We'll talk about that too. But what you noticed that people were doing to convey that they were listening when you were either talking yourself or when you were observing someone else. What did you notice? Edwin.
Okay. I went through and made notes in our document. So when Dea was listening to me, there was one thing, she kind of laughed a little bit at one point, and so it really felt like, oh, she's affected by the story, so she's really following it. So I felt that. Dee Dee was focused. She'd shake her head. She looks very concentrated. She'd kind of move her mouth, kind of like,
Yeah.
and kind of smile and had kind of crinkle her mouth at different points. Deb was also very focused. It's a little bit dark, so it's hard to see.
Right.
So the darkness kind of affects being able to see. Slow head shaking. She'd go, a little bit. Denise was a shaking head often, so a lot of head shaking and kind of sounds too. So I was really kind of noticing those.
So lots of different sort of behavioral things that people were doing that to convey that seemed like they were listening. What about anybody else? What other things did you notice?
I would just add on top of that, to me, the biggest part, both knowing that I'm being listened to and then observing in others, for me, it is about the facial expressions.
Mm-hmm.
I think whether it's the eyes focusing or, changes in your countenance in some way. Yeah. And I think that, I've learned how important those things are, because you can't just, if you're just looking straight ahead and giving nothing on your face, if there's no expression, you almost want to kind of knock on somebody's head and say, hello.
Are you in there?
Exactly. Is anybody home? Right?
Yeah.
Because there does need to be something for me to be able to feel like you got it. So like you expressed, Edwin, the smiles of Dea, I put that down too, the smiles and facial expressions. And there was a softness as well in some ways, but it depended on what the person was talking about, right? Mm-hmm. That you could see when it was something lighthearted, that the person would get, a little smiley about it or a little lighter. And then when it was serious, it was more, sort of crunched brow and that sort of thing. So the facial expressions mimicking what the person is describing.
Yeah.
Or mirroring, like we've talked about, the it's more subtle mirroring, but yeah.
Exactly.
What about Deb? What did you notice? Deb?
Yeah. I heard you go, and then I could see the yellow line come up that the audio was activated. And I saw you're shaking your head. And I think, everybody had subtle little pieces that indicated that they were there, that they were engaged in the story.
Mm-hmm.
And that's enough. It's a felt thing. You can tell if someone's there, engaged, hearing
Right.
the meaning of your story or not. And you can tell whether they give indicators or not.
Yeah.
Someone can give indicators and still be off in their mind,
They could, yeah.
So you can tell if someone's really there with you or not.
Yeah. Daya, what about you?
Yeah, it's all the similar things, the nodding, and what really seemed, felt important for me was the reflecting, the mirroring of what the other person is saying in the listener's expression. That somehow feels like there's some warmth in that the person who's talking gets to see that, oh yeah, okay, she gets what I'm saying, or it's that expression that's that's kind of what happened for me. I think a feeling of being understood just by the mirroring those expressions also really matters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That the facial expression and really when you slow down and you're focused, and that's what you have to express yourself with, it seems to put you in a different space just being there, because you're kind of there's not a lot of words in between you, you're just there, and you can really absorb, if you will, when you're listening what the person is saying.
And like Deb said, it's people can make these responses and still be disconnected. But what I noticed here was it's more of absorbing what the person is saying and letting it move me to make that expression. It's not an act.
Right.
It's like receiving what they're saying and then responding. The response just comes, and if we are really being present and listening at that moment.
And what always really strikes me in this too is just how much in 3 minutes, how much you can really of someone's story that you can get. I mean, it's amazing to hear someone actually speaking. And when that's your focus, then to listen, you really get a lot. The one thing that stood out to me, and I don't know if you all noticed it, but I was trying to pay attention to the eye contact issue, because and Bill mentions in the book, but certainly in trainings in counseling or any of those things, our focus on our ability to maintain eye contact, and how much we convey with our eyes is really an important component. And in this kind of format, it seemed to me like I could tell when somebody was actually looking at the person, but I don't know. What did you all experience about that? Were you able to tell that they were watching? I mean, that they were focused on the person with their eyes, or anything?
I could tell you were, but I don't think I was looking so much at you when I was speaking.
Right.
I was in my own little world.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Which is the way it should be.
Right.
I mean, frankly, it's not up to the speaker to get eye contact with me. It's up to me to have eye contact with the speaker. And I also think it's almost more important, I think, in this format, Denise, You know, in using online, or at least that's been my observation, and now that I've been using online platforms for a while, when somebody is here with me speaking live, I try not to focus too much on them because that can be uncomfortable. But I think there's something in the platform that translates differently. That if I don't see eye contact, then I assume the person is distracted.
Yeah.
And not listening. Maybe because I can't see what's
Right.
going on. What are they looking at?
Well, and it made it difficult in here too with the small, you know, like in thinking about the design issue of having the two people that where you can see both their faces, might be helpful too, because it was really hard, whether it's the light, but it was hard to tell in some circumstances whether or not they were maintaining, you know, were trying to maintain eye contact. And did you experience, I mean, Deb, you said you felt that, you know, that being that connection, that you saw it even if you weren't paying attention. And I felt the same thing, and I wasn't paying that much attention to Edwin when he was listening because I was in my own world there, you know. But it just is an interesting thing I think we have to think about, because it is so much of an important part about how we convey that attention, that presence, the capacity to be with people. Deb.
So it makes me wonder if the speaker could gain some skills in not dissociating so much, and maybe that's a part of losing someone's attention, that we just go into our own world. I think it's worthy of, you know, noticing this and coming up with ways that we touch in with that other person at different points, with eye contact, with I'm not quite sure what, but rather than, you know, I do my thing and the listener's there for me, versus, you know, doing something different, so that we help and train them to continue to pay attention.
Yeah. Yeah, and that goes back, I think, to the what I was mentioning earlier, that might be an important thing to consider in this model, because this model it was designed to be a where it is not a back and forth. Not a back and forth thing, and that I have responsibility to train myself to pay attention. I have that responsibility to do that, and that when in training others, that's a big focus. Like, how do you maintain presence? And when you're learning a new skill, oftentimes you're really busy thinking about, what am I going to say? What's my next response? How am I going to, you know, what kind of reflection am I going to use? What kind of question do I want to ask? You know, you're really busy and as you get practiced at it, you're more in the space of this nonverbal, where you're just open, allowing it in. But that doesn't cover what you're talking about, Deb, about when you, as the speaker, whether or not you need to be engaged with the person, and how you need to be engaged.
I think so. Otherwise it's still kind of a one-sided show.
This is it is one-sided in that way, that that the listener is working very hard to get themselves out of the picture, and not inserting themselves, that they're in service of the other person, and in service of hearing what the other person is. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't switch roles, because all of these exercises, we go to switching roles, so that you experience what it's like to be on the other end. But again, it is more one-sided in that way. So, Edwin?
Yeah, there was I've been trying to be more sensitive to the subtleties of the listening. So it's like I kind of looking at, where is my where's my awareness? What's going on in me when I'm listening? So when you were telling your story, I'm seeing sort of pictures. I'm picturing you. I have this picture of the trailers. You know, I have the picture of, I think it was a dam you were working.
Yeah.
I have a picture of this dam, sort of. I have a picture of the individuals. So it's like when you're telling the story, I'm noticing pictures developing in my mind. I'm just wondering, you know, and I'm sort of noticing this, and I'm also looking at you, and I'm, you know, noticing, looking very excited, very engaged, and I'm hearing the story of equality is very important, and I feel a resonance, like, yeah, it's like equality is important to me too. So there's kind of like all these kind of, and I'm trying to be aware of, you know, where to place the awareness, because there's all this stuff going on in me when I'm listening.
You know, that's really interesting, because in our motivational interviewing network, this topic, this kind of exercise about looking at what is going on in your head. You're the clinician. We talk about clinicians, of course, but you're the counselor, you're the listener, and pausing to say, what is happening in my head as this goes? Am I just planning my next move? Am I drawing pictures and allowing those pictures? Am I resonating and going, oh yeah, that's, you know, and those are ways that you recognize what is happening for you and what your normal tendencies are. And then you learn how to use those judiciously. I mean, you practice using those judiciously. And that, to me, that's the real benefit of this nonverbal exercise, is just that you recognize what you do want to jump in and do, and then you refrain from doing that just for the sake of the exercise. You refrain from doing it, but it's useful information.
Yeah, I have a curiosity, like what's going on in everyone else's mind, you know, experience. Right, like, how is everybody else kind of handling this? Yeah. I'm kind of curious.
In other people's mind?
When they listen.
When you were listening, what was going on in your mind?
Oh, you're asking me, or
just
I'm
asking the group?
The group. Okay.
What are other people experiencing that was going on in their mind when they were listening?
Dia, you were going to say something, I think. Didn't you have your hand up?
Yeah. I was going to kind of connect to what Deb was saying about, I think the people who are talking would instinctively look at the person who's listening to really know if they are, I mean, I did that, that even though most of the time when I was talking, I was in my own story, but I did connect back and see, you know, look at Deb, her expression, and that kind of reassures me, like when she was looking at me, and the smiles or the nods really reassured that, yeah, she's there. And I think that people would instinctively do that because my need is to be heard, and I really want to make sure this person is really listening, you know. So I would probably just look to see if this person is hearing.
Yeah, I wonder if it's something that's almost innate in us as humans. And we want that. I was thinking about my cat and how when he's doing something, he'll periodically look back at me like, are you paying attention? You know, I'm doing something here. And so on an animal level, you know, I see it. And Abyssinians, his breed, are cats that like people. So they get very attached to their owners. They're very dog-like in that quality. And so I wonder if that's kind of part of our animal instincts somehow, is looking for that. I don't know if it's reassurance or almost, can I keep going because you're paying attention, or, you know, what exactly is going on with that?
Yeah, exactly. You know, in the Marshall Rosenberg, the NBC, you know, you do it in small pieces, and then you ask, would you be willing to tell me what you thought you heard me say? Because they've interpreted maybe there's a chance they've interpreted.
Mm-hmm.
And this is when you're really, it's not just pure listening. It's a two-way, agreement to talk about a subject, or it comes up and there are two people that have to make a decision about something. It's a little slightly different, but still we're checking in.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to check in this system, except for doing this.
Well, I think that really speaks to how we open up and present to others too when we put this together about what the purpose is. So in terms of the skill building, this is really about skill building for the listener. So and that may not be the focus that we want. I mean, it may be that we want more of, or that's what the thing is, to want more of a model of that, like nonviolent communication, where you're actually looking at helping two people have the conversation and not just listening. To me, this is a prerequisite. That learning how to listen, and even this experience of in this setting here of listening and recognizing what's going on in your head, or how you're noticing, or what you really do convey, even with the simplest things, and that some of it is probably innate. That there's a genetic, that mirroring is really a valuable thing. And that we are engaged in the communication, but it's sort of like a prerequisite to being able to participate in a back and forth, because it is to learn how to receive it, to learn how to receive what the person's saying.
Yeah.
Okay. My experience with NVC also has been like we do silent listening also. So I think it's different ways of listening that I would suppose that would go even in this model, that at times people don't want to be reflected. They just need silent listening, you need to, maybe with practice, try to see which someone who's, if I'm listening to someone who has deep trauma, they don't want to be reflected. They just want to be silently listened to at that time. And, it's just taking a call at that time, like, okay, who am I listening to and what kind of presence do I need to give there?
Actually, when you think about it, the facial expressions, all the things that we were doing are forms of reflection.
Mm-hmm.
That you're, and everybody talked about that, about the sort of mirroring, the smiling, and when those things were there, and they really are, they are a form of reflection. It's just a nonverbal reflection of what's happening. So it's
good point.
You're not reflecting.
So what came up for me in talking about this right now is that really what is mirroring? And mirroring goes back to, this is what mothers are taught or naturally learn or inherit from their mothers. And it's validation.
Yeah.
And it's connecting to the other person. And it just dawned on me, but I mean, that I think would be a worthwhile concept, because just because you go from 0 to 2 years old doesn't mean you don't need that mirroring anymore.
Yeah.
I just muted you, Deb. Dee Dee, because there's a little bit of a echo. So that's why I periodically. But on the other topic was. Is I see the training that we're doing about developing an empathic relationship, developing an empathic culture. So it's the cultural aspect of it, and these components of, there's the skill building for listeners, there's like a lot of components of it, and we're kind of looking at, we can practice each of the individual components to build up to building a more empathic relationship, be it in this group, be it, in our families, be it in society in general. So sort of conceptually, that's how I kind of look at it.
Yeah, that, and it might be that like this book is focused, especially at the beginning, on the listener learning how to listen, and then there may be a whole nother section on learning how to learning how to express yourself in a way that's that a more empathic way, and then learning how to engage in the conversation. But it's sort of like the foundation. The foundation is for people to be able to listen well, participate.
Yeah. Yeah, to me, to piggyback on that, Janice, it's about baby steps, right? And each of these, and I know when I use this exercise or something similar to that in trainings, people often become very uncomfortable in both roles, but especially as the listener. And I think that's good. I think that's the point, that we're not used to just listening. And so learning how to physically reflect, as you were talking about, what are the things that I can do, and to really see, is my face conveying what I want it to convey? I had to learn that as a young counselor. I didn't realize that I was coming across in a way that I had not intended. And I started watching people that I admired and seeing, what do they do? And then kind of practicing that. How do I know when I'm being listened to? And then mirroring those things and kind of mimicking that as a way to increase my own abilities. And I think this is a really important step in doing that.
So I think that is sort of covers what we do for these exercises in a regular training. This is very similar to what we have done consistently in regular training. Like you take the steps, the building blocks to listening, and then in fact, though, those building blocks, I mean, if we could easily, especially in this size of group, you could easily have covered the next exercise as well in a 2-hour block. You can cover, where you're practicing each building block, and then you prepare yourself along the way. So you could do more than 2 in this size of group. We could have easily accommodated the next couple chapters probably by doing that. So the exercises are brief and simple, but they build on each other. So and it might be that it's that we could put those together for the rest of it. He goes on in this book to the more relational aspects and what you're doing, but it builds on that.
Yeah, he's actually, as I understand it, he's concerned about the polarization that's happening in the country, in the United States, and that's, I think it's chapter 15 or 16. He's talking about reaching out to people on the other side to make an effort. I think he does that. Yeah. Yeah. So,
but I don't know that I knowing Bill pretty well. He is not, I would say he is open, he is really open to and goes out of his way to listen to people, but he is not that focused on getting heard. He wouldn't be, he wouldn't be worried about that. I don't think he's not worried about that. He is more focused on being able to, that the listening is healing in and of itself of that rift, and to me it's a lot harder part, because in that polarization you want both. You want to be, I want to be able to bring my point of view in too, but having been around him and worked with him for many years, that's not what he focuses on.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more like, what can I do as a listener to help heal this situation?
Yeah, I'm saying that. Sorry.
Yes. Yeah. So
Yeah, you also are seeing more of the relational part. Then it's like you want to be in a relationship, I think like Deb talks about, where she gets heard too. I'm willing to listen, but I want to be heard too. And how do we set up that is there sort of an agreement there, or sometimes it's a nonverbal, just inherent agreement that this is the type of relationship that we want. But how do we actually kind of foster that? And that's where I see the empathy circle as sort of a model that here's this basic practice just to get people started in this mutually empathic, with a few simple rules. It creates that sense of equality. Everyone gets heard, and here's this basic practice. And then we kind of build up.
Well, and actually seeing it, how this worked here in this, you could utilize that. We utilize that sort of format of the empathy circle with different tasks for the listener each time that you could build on it so that you got reflective. And then, but the important part there is that then you do reverse and you, but people knowing when the difference between when I am listening and when I am being listened to, even if it's flows in the same conversation, is an important distinction about when it's sort of like turn taking. When how do we take turns with this in a way that so that it doesn't just devolve into a that surface level conversation that we have where we just go back and forth.
Well, and it's also, to me, to add to that, there's a difference between what you were saying about Bill wanting to be the listener, and bringing that. It depends on what my role is, right?
Yes.
If I'm the counselor, it's not a conversation that I'm having.
Right.
Really. I'm having somewhat of a conversation, but that isn't the point. My role is to be the listener to that person who's on the other side. Whereas with an empathy circle, it is about both people or all peoples having an opportunity to share. So it's a very different role.
Right.
And just kind of being aware of that. Yeah.
What came to mind just recently is, was Mr. Rogers.
Oh, that was a wonderful movie, wasn't it?
Well, I didn't see the movie, but I grew up with him, the TV personality and his heart, his interest. He was building, a little, empathetic community there, that there was concern and interest and thoughtfulness. And I don't know if that's a model, but he had lots of different personalities he interacted with, and he did so appropriately for each situation. Is from what I remember, it wasn't just a one stamp fits all. So as Dee Dee is saying, and we all understand there are different scenarios, different situations, different people, and how do you adapt to each one accordingly? And I don't think one is right, one is wrong. There are wrong ways, which we demonstrated earlier, but so anyway, that just came to mind of kind of a model of how to show and exemplify what we're doing.
I know this is like I'm just breaking in to tell you what to do, but the movie about him, and I think it would be worthwhile for anyone in what we're doing here. It is so wonderful, that movie.
Yeah.
And
see, Denise, I'm going to interrupt you because for me, I didn't like Mr. Rogers.
Uh-huh.
I couldn't stand him. And what it was, and I didn't know this as a kid, because you can't, I don't think we have that development yet. But as an adult, what I realized is that he was showcasing something that I didn't have in my life and that I wished I had. And so by seeing it all the time and how wonderful everybody was, made me so sad that it kind of nauseated me in that way. That was the physical response that I had. And it wasn't to him personally, right? I got it on that intellectual level. But so for me, that would not be a good example, right?
I share that with you. And I share that with you. I didn't watch him all the time, and there was something about what's wrong with me, and I'm going to downgrade him because I can't do that. I get that, but nonetheless, as we look back, of course, he's
But I am looking forward to seeing if I can see the film, and now as an adult to re-experience that in a different way, because I do think he was important.
Yeah.
In what he was trying to get across. Yeah, I just really wanted to be a part of it.
Well, and the focus on empathy and empathizing with young children, and not just not sort of overlooking them, or
he wasn't dismissive.
Yeah, right.
To kids. Yeah.
So, all right.
Yeah.
So
I think we're done.
We're done. So,
right?
Yeah.
Back to Edwin.
Okay. Did you want to do the next week too?
Well, I'm gone next week.
Oh. Denise?
Sure.
This was great.
Could we get a temperature reading on what everybody thought of this? I'm interested in speaking to that, and I would like the opportunity for others.
Yeah.
Temperature reading. I found it, it's nice not to facilitate, have other energies facilitate, to see how others do the facilitation and the approach. So having the contrast, and so I just find it helpful to move forward. Deb, did you have?
So yeah, I kind of like getting into the nuts and bolts of it. I'm feeling like I'm progressing into the goal, which was to go through the book. And I liked combining chapters. I think it's doable. And so I feel I'm going like this, like a little more congealed with it. That's not a negative sign, but a little more congealed sense of it and more interest. My frustration level is almost nil right now, whereas previously it was really building, and I'm going, what do I do with this? And because we spent so much time just kind of debating issues, and not that it was just getting old for me. And I was one of the debaters. So I like this.
Dee Dea? Oh, so.
I'm always, my attention span, my OCD, is always better when I can participate more fully. And it's also the way that I've learned, I learn. I have a more difficult time with just the didactic piece anymore, which is good for me, because that's how I was trained. So, and since we're moving to more client-centered or student-centered at a university setting, it's good that I'm starting to feel more comfortable moving away from that and coming up with more experiential pieces.
Mm-hmm. Dea?
Yeah, it was interesting to do the practice today. It was fun. And I the couple of calls, although my internet connection wasn't great, some part of it I was wondering, where am I in this? Because I have not done I haven't really been part of creating courses or even more so online courses. So I was somewhat getting lost sometimes with the discussions of what was happening with I'm also kind of getting an idea of how to do it, and I'm enjoying that. And today was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's
and
more
I also like the facilitation with both Denise and Deb. It was it's like seeing the different styles of how people are doing it.
So
I would say that we could probably do 3 chapters. I would say that in the 2-hour period, we could do the asking questions, forming reflections, and diving deeper.
So do you want to lead that for the next?
Yeah, I don't mind doing that. And
Okay.
part of it will depend on the size of the group. So, but it sounds like some people are going to be gone. And so it'll probably be a reasonable size group. And I can adapt it to the size as well.
Okay, and then anyone else, Deb or Day, if you want to facilitate after that, like the following weeks, try it. We could do that too.
Okay, yeah, I probably need some time to prepare and, for that. So, so Denise, you're doing 7, 8, and 9?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know how to group them. Denise, I think it would be good for you or Dee Dee to tell us what's the best groupings, how many chapters should be done together after 7, 8, 9.
It depends on the time.
It depends on the topic. Yeah.
Yeah, the time and the topic.
Well,
so
for this book.
Right. So again, this whole section that we've been through now, from the roadblocks all the way through, that is like one chunk that you can, as a 3-hour, 4-hour practice that you can lead people through. So coming up, the chapters are a little bit different because they're, they get more, the exercises are a little different. They're beyond the initial learning exercises. So, but they'll be fun to play with.
So my question is specific. I'm needing to know, Denise is managing 7, 8, and 9. I'm needing to know what chapters would be good and doable for me to do either one alone or as a group.
Yeah, here's my thoughts, if I could interject here, that 11, 12, and 13 go well together.
Yeah.
10, I think, is going to be odd to fit into 11.
We might be able to cover 10 next week.
So I'm wondering,
I could structure it. I could structure it so that we covered 10 next week too.
yeah, and maybe because even reflections can get more complicated depending on how, but maybe even going back to that at some point, or adding a piece to that if we wanted to.
Yeah.
With 11, 12, and 13, because that's so much a part of being understood and how we talk about communication in relationships too, is that reflective piece.
All right, and then after 13, what does the combo look like, if any?
Then
Well,
I think you've got
the
pretty
whole
much
time on values.
Yeah, each chapter, which is also lengthier.
Yeah.
They're no longer 2 or 3 pages. Now they're 10 and 12 pages.
Okay. So are we looking at doing 14 and 15 and 16 by themselves?
Yeah,
I think
14
we oughta,
is listening, 15 is listening well in conflict, and 16 is promise of empathic listening.
Are we looking at doing those as standalones?
I don't know about the chapter 16. It might be just something, a discussion that you could have at the end of.
It's a wrap up.
As a wrap up. Yeah. The listening for conflict, I think you could, listening well in conflict, you could, you would probably want to take a standalone and
the values.
Have a couple of different practices in there about how you might structure that. And and the values one, I think, is really a useful one to do. There's a lot of different exercises about the values that can be done and to really help people facilitate that.
What chapter is values?
That's 14, Deb.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so I suspect 14 and 15 will be standalones. And then, like you said, 16 is just sort of summarizing and wrapping it all up. That's kind of my take on it.
So Daya, are you going to be here for the next 2 weeks or three sessions?
Yeah, most likely.
Okay. Do you have a preference of, and then we have other people to consider.
Jess and Alex.
3 other people. So I don't know if Daya, would you want to work on 11, 12, and 13 with me? And then we can leave the remaining open if those other people want to do it.
Yeah, I'm open to that. We can do that.
Okay.
So maybe we could mail each other and fix a time that works for both of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like early on Monday or Tuesday, something like that. All right.
Yeah.
All right. I have your, we'll email each other and pick and give a menu of times.
Yeah.
Some choices to connect. Okay.
Yeah.
Sound good?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay.
Okay, then let me just get that again. We have, today was chapter 5
And 6.
and 6, and then you're doing, I'm just going to write this, and then you're doing chapter 7, 8, and 9.
And 10.
Oh, and 10.
Well, that's next week. What's the date of next week? Just kind of August.
I think it's the 4th.
August 4th?
I think that's right. Let me see here real quick. The 2nd or the 4th?
I'll look it up.
4.
It's the 7th.
Yep, the 4th.
No, it's not. Oh, I'm on the wrong month.
Yep.
Okay, August 4th. And then Dea and I would be August 11th.
And doing 11, 12, 13? Is that
Yeah.
Okay, all right, got that. And then we'll leave the other one open for, we'll see how we handle that one.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So with that, we had set our intention, fostering a culture of empathy. We want to blow our intention out with us, take it with us for the rest of the day and the week.
Where is it? Oh, there.
Right here. It's taking a deep
Not in
breath.
the middle.
I got to put it out real fast because it smolders, and then my partner doesn't like the smell of canola, smoldering canola oil. So, okay, great. Then I stopped.